Noir operates this high pitch. There's very high pitch of emotion. Stakes are very high in noir. It's desire, it's ambition, it's greed, it's sort of big feeling.
Megan Abbott is a legend for good reason. No one combines the style of classic noir with the psyches of sophisticated men and women who are willing to do anything to succeed better than Abbott. Critically acclaimed and mega best-selling crime fiction writer Megan Abbott is the author of 10 hit novels, including The Fever, Give Me Your Hand, and The End of Everything.
There's something dangerous about the boredom of teenage girls.
She is the co-creator, executive producer, and showrunner of USA Network's Dare Me, based on her own novel.
What is it about the big city that brought you here?
She also served as a staff writer on HBO's David Simon show, The Deuce. Abbott's gripping atmospheric novels explore the dark sides of femininity, ambition, and power. In her latest, The Turnout, Megan takes on the ruthlessly competitive behind-the-scenes world of ballet. In today's conversation, Megan is joined by fellow internationally best-selling crime novelist Paula Hawkins, author of The Girl on the Train and Into the Water. Hawkins' hotly anticipated new novel, A Slow Fire Burning, will be available August 31st.
So it is my great pleasure to be here this evening. I'm speaking to Megan Abbott about her fantastic new novel, Turnout, which has been described as dark, juicy, tinged with horror, a dreamy, sexy deep dive into a subculture. It's one of my books of the year. It's absolutely amazing. The pace is at times breathless. The characters are gorgeously drawn. It's got this wonderful sense of place. It is available. Signed copies, by the way, are available from Left Bank Books. Megan, congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you so much for doing this, Paula. As you know, we had messaged each other. I just read your upcoming book, A Slow Fire Burning, and there's like all these little connections I kept seeing between the two. So it feels only natural that we would speak.
Yeah, it certainly does. The first thing I wanted to ask you, which probably seems a little bit obvious, but I have to ask, you've written about cheerleaders, you've written about gymnasts, and this book is set in the world of ballet. So what is it about these particularly athletic subcultures that sort of attracts you?
Yeah, I sort of bond with this with my therapist regularly. I guess I have never been good at anything physical. You know, I tried to do dance and I couldn't. I tried to do sports and I just never had that relationship where I felt like I had any kind of mastery or control over my body. So I was so fascinated by it. And then I also think, and I wonder if you agree with this, I do think there's a crossover with writers, like the discipline and the superstitions and things, but except it's more visual, whereas ours is all internal. But it feels like athletes are always talking about needing to do these certain rituals before they compete, or not competing on different days of the week and drinking certain things. And I know writers have a lot of that too. Like they can only write in this place this way, or they have to sort of trick themselves into it. So maybe there's some similarity, or maybe that's just more wishful thinking than athletic ability.
Do you have particular rituals then? Do you have like things that you have to do before you write?
Sort of. I mean, they change, right? Like there's whatever's been working well lately is the thing I want to go back to. So it can be a little, I mean, I've never been good at writing in hotel rooms and things like that. So sometimes I'll have certain ones like that to try to get the space a little less Marriott, a little more something else.
I was wondering, because one of the characters, Derek, says, he never knew how much girls like to torture themselves when he's talking about the ballet. And I was wondering if there was something about that. It's the discipline, isn't it? And the pain that they put themselves through. And while I think we acknowledge that a lot in men's sports, I think we perhaps sometimes don't take women's athletic activity quite so seriously, do we?
No, we really don't. And when we do, there tends to be like gymnastics or something where they're certainly ballet where you're not supposed to show it. You have to have this mask,
Mm,
whether it's sort of jaunty and jolly in gymnastics or in ballet, it's supposed to be so serene and you're never supposed to show yourself sweating or working or. And I think that's definitely more true when women either sports or dance. They're not supposed to reveal any of the effort that went into it. It's
yeah.
supposed to be behind that, which always feels like a sort of it's sort of obvious, but kind of a metaphor for womanhood, right? That we're always sort of wearing these masks and trying to hide the effort and sort of the perfectionism and the people pleasing thing that's sort of been wired in at least for past many countless generations. It seems like it's changing, but
And you've just said that you were never a ballet dancer yourself, or not, at least not in the accomplishment. So because this feels like all your books actually, they feel so real and so like this world so well. So did you do like stacks of research?
I did. I guess I really like that part. I would probably only do that and never write the book. I always try to read or watch enough where I can write without having to keep stopping, right? So that is to sort of, you want to be able to see the world, have the textures of it, the sense and smells and sounds of a studio. So it's a lot of like obvious stuff like reading ballet memoirs and but then it's sort of other stuff that honestly I couldn't have done before, but there's big companies and small dance rehearsals on YouTube, and you can watch the rehearsal where
Right.
and the cameras can go in and you can see stuff you would never see going to the ballet, and you get to see the behind the scenes aspect. So that was very intoxicating to sort of capture the part that no one talks about. There is so much of the scrim of ballet, and in fact the dancers who have spoken out about some of the challenges of it tend to get piled upon. You're not supposed to reveal that, so that's also interesting too, because I think that's also part of the darkness and difficulty and torturous parts are part of its beauty too. So it's just we don't acknowledge it. It's somehow in there.
It's a part again of that mask, isn't it? That the appearance of everything being perfect and beautiful and effortless.
Yeah.
While underneath there are like broken, blistering toes and things that we're not supposed to see.
Yes.
One of the many things I loved about the book actually is that how it has this kind of fairy tale quality, and it's a very dark fairy tale, obviously. You've got this, as somebody said, it's tinged with horror. You've got this monstrous interloper coming into this world and sort of ripping things up, and you feel almost like something is being released as he's like tearing the place apart. And yet at the same time, it's about something really ordinary and everyday, and it's about the renovation of a property. But that renovation, which I'm sure many people will recognize, where it goes on and on, it gets more and more expensive, and the contractor just won't go away. He's always there. So I was just wondering, how did you do that? How did you get that balance between like the horror and the everyday?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like it's always there beneath the surface, I guess, with crime, right? There is a natural fairy tale connection because there's sort of eternal drives and eternal situations. The stranger comes to town. There's something wrong in the family. There's a secret that's going to be revealed. There's sort of fundamental fairy tale structures. And then, the sort of, but that comes, I don't know how it is for you, that kind of sneaks up on me. I'm really writing about the horror of renovation, and then the other stuff comes, through the back door. Or maybe it's vice versa, but it's sort of the renovation. It wasn't until I was really far in, embarrassingly far in, someone's supposed to know what they're doing. but like the studio that he's renovating, their ballet studio, is just this sort of stand-in for this intrusion into their lives and the sort of story they've told themselves, the Durant sisters and Charlie, one of the sisters' husbands, about themselves and their family. he's like literally tearing all the walls and structures that they've built up. He's sort of tearing it down, which is a sort of fairy tale image too. So I guess it's always sneaking in there. And there's so much ballet fairy tale. Like, well, there's like the red shoes, and there's a lot of sort of natural. Well, and so many of the famous ballets come from fairy tales. So I guess it was inevitable that it was going to creep in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we should just talk about this, the monstrous interloper, for a second. So this is Derek, who is the contractor. He's this just magnificently drawn character. He is, and this is your word, the man who goes as he pleases, who knows no boundaries, who leaves messes in his wake. A cliche of what women supposedly like secretly under the skin. And he's very different, I think, from the kind of characters that you generally write. So where does he come from?
It's funny, he is so different. It was actually like an effort. Like each time I was trying to decide something about him, it would go against my instinct. I tend to write more, I suppose, beautiful and glamorous men, men that sort of have
like Charlie.
Yeah, exactly. Who's this sort of former dancer, and he's so lovely. And so it was sort of to make, Derek is just, I had written this long scene that I ended up cutting from the book where he's like eating sushi and he's just grabbing sushi roll after sushi. And it's so horrifying to as a dancer and as someone who's so disciplined. And so it really was trying to force myself. And then I started to like, what always happens with these characters, you start to enjoy them and you go in more. Because he's, this, in some ways, this family needs to be disrupted. And his motives are not to help them, but so that was part of it. And the other part was this weird thing. I don't know if you listened to that podcast or watched the show Dirty John, which
so
so I was fascinated by that. That's about a con artist, and in that case a sort of lethal one. But what was fascinating me is the comments on when the podcast first aired, it's almost entirely by women, where they were blaming the women for getting conned by this guy. They were all attacking, not this guy who's a murderer, but they were like, how could you be so stupid? Dumb whores, like all kinds of terrible language. And it was just, it seemed like such a projection of some kind of deep anxiety. And so I wanted to sort of explore that with these two sisters who respond to him so differently. And Dara, who sort of basically tells the story, is so, she's the one that's so judgmental and, protesting too much, perhaps. It always feels like in those cases.
Yeah, but just because she's sort of oddly angry about it, isn't she? So her sister Marie starts an affair with this man and she can't bear him, but she does feel, she sort of sees that Marie is in some way degrading herself or humiliating herself by being with this man. It's not just that she disapproves that he's not, the perfect man. There's something, deeper under there, isn't there?
Yeah, it feels like a violation to her. It felt very natural once I started Dara's voice, but it wasn't until later that I sort of started to go deeper on just trying to figure out these women, in other words. And I'm sure I've been that woman. A lot of this revisiting we're doing of the 90s, and figures like Britney Spears and Monica Lewinsky. And I never would have thought anything like that, but I definitely have dramatically changed how I view those stories and the way they're told to me. So I started to really think about how hard women are on other women, how much it's sort of like you're ruining it for all of us by doing this.
Yeah.
So there's
that too. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also a sense of that if you can other those women enough, you can that somehow that you're going to be safe from all of that. Absolutely. I'm a good girl. I'm not like that. Nothing bad's going to happen to me.
That's right.
So let's talk. Dara and Marie are very much the heroes of the story. They're the heart of the story. Can you tell us a bit about them? That they are dancers. They are family sisters, and they are orphans.
Yeah.
So, but they have this very intense bond, don't they?
Yes, and that was sort of how the book started, in those early sort of where you're trying to sketch out. It was really about these two little girls, and it was sort of inspired. I only realized this a couple months ago. When I did try to take ballet, I took ballet at this studio. That all the classes were led by these two sisters. They were twins in this case, and they were so beautiful and we were fascinated by that and what their life was like. The only way you could tell them apart is one had bangs and one didn't, and they were just we were just fixated. We're 8, 9 years old. We were just enthralled by them, and so that was a little bit about sisters who dance, and are they competitive? Are they rivals? What is their relationship with the body like, having been raised together? So that's sort of with Dara and Marie, and in their case, because they have a sort of calamitous childhood, with siblings that are in a household where there's just sort of havoc. They have these parents who are just, like the Kowalskis, tearing up the joint every night. So there's this kind of merging, and kind of parenting. Dara sort of, even though she's just a little older than Marie, sort of becomes the parent. So.
And I think, this is, in all of your books, you write about the intensity of female friendship. I always think that you write about, like, as though you're someone who really loves women and finds women endlessly interesting. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because it's sort of, I think about this when I'm reading you. I think this is something that we're both interested in. It's sort of like how dark you can go into female psyche without feeling like you're making things worse for women. In other words, because I believe that more complexity and ambiguity that we give our characters, the better. But it is sort of tricky when you're trying to walk the line. You don't want to become your own misogynist. In other words, by sort of making these, the women are so dark in the books, but I always try. It's one of the things I love about your books is you go through the other side of that. Like, you can start there, but when you see where they come from and what they've been through, and it sort of becomes a story of resilience, and that's so beautiful, that mistakes and wrong choices, but you're sort of going through the other side of that. And I think for women, we're just not allowed as many mistakes in life. That's just the way it is. And so I think there's something so beautiful about failure and screwing up and losing control and all these things that are human, that somehow aren't allowed in women.
Yeah, I'm always slightly hurt, I think, almost, when people talk about how unlikable they find my characters, because I actually think, well, yes, there might be things about them that you don't like, but in the end, there's also, as you said, there's resilience, and as in your character too, and there are deep bonds of love, and there is, a sense that these people, they might judge each other and be mean to each other, but they would also do anything for each other at the right moment. So there's a real affection and a real love for these people, and as you say, they are complex and nuanced, and isn't that what we demand from fictional characters if they're going to be good?
Exactly. And in some ways, women, especially female friends or family members, that you're sort of like comrades, you're sort of in a war together. So things are going to get ugly. But you're also, that's the extent of my military metaphors. I was going to say, you go to the foxhole together, you're sort of going to look out for each other in the foxhole. And that women, it's so, I remember I've had this experience many times doing adaptation stuff and trying to explain that the way that women communicate can look so different, is it's sort of, there's a lot of things that women understand about other women that isn't being said. And so I think that's part of it too. There's a lot of, Dara and Marie are very much at odds for so much of the book, but to me, it's never in doubt that they love each other intensely. And sometimes love looks like that,
Yeah. There is a wonderful line, and this is not talking about Dara and Marie, but I did write this one down. You're talking about how the the actual dancers in the ballet school can be super mean to each other. And you said the true terrorism of girls is the accuracy of their aim, which I just think was, and that you really nailed that bit too, about how in those rivalries, in those hot house environments, people can be, you know, so young girls can, oh, and I'm sure young boys too, but particularly young girls can be super mean.
I think so. I mean, I think it's also because they're not supposed to, you know, boys may sort of get in a shoving match, or girls aren't supposed to do that.
But this is more than anything else, it's a story about family, really, isn't it? A family that has particular problems. And again, I'm going to quote you: no one wants to face the truth that every family was a hot house, a swamp, its own atmosphere, its own rules. And do you think that is actually true of all families?
I haven't met one yet where I didn't think that was true. I got close enough to it. I think, you know, and it for better and for worse, right? You're in these roles. It's very hard to get out of the roles and positions you're locked in. I think this is something you write about beautifully, but there's no escaping it. Once you're the troubled one, once you're the problem child, you're the fixer, or very hard to reinvent yourself in your family. And I think that sort of the claustrophobia of it for Dara and Marie and for Charlie, who sort of lived together their whole lives and never really ventured beyond. It's sort of in high relief, but I think it's always there. I mean, how we fall back into those roles when we talk to see our family, if we haven't seen them for a while, I always become like a sullen 13-year-old, which is always what I want. You know, everybody sort of takes on their role. It's hard to break that, but that's also, I think that is also the way that families can sort of align themselves against a common enemy is also fascinating to me.
Yeah, because I think you've talked about how those bonds are important to you and are part of what holds you together, but they can also be imprisoning, and can stop you from achieving your potential.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's sort of easy when you're in a sort of the ballet is sort of eternal youth. You're trapped, you know, and everything is sort of fairy tale, and time stops and you can't be an old ballet dancer. And so it sort of heightens it even further, this notion of stasis and, you know, those family patterns that actually you gotta break.
For me, I think you're one of these really rare writers who kind of hit the sweet spot between that you get critical acclaim, but you also have commercial success, which I think is what everybody aims for. But what I was wondering was, do you have a label for your books? Because I know that they're called psychological thrillers. They sort of vaguely fall in the crime area, but there's not, you know, they don't follow like particularly ordinary conventions of crime novels. There's not sort of a body at the beginning and a detective trying to solve something or what have you. So how do you think of them, or do you not label them?
In my head, or someone asks me, I say I'm a crime writer, but what should mean? I mean, all those labels that I know you get too, domestic. I mean, there's always like a new term. Sometimes mystery, but I always call it crime novel, just because for me the crime is the engine to do everything else. It gives you your story engine, and I don't know why everyone doesn't write them, because like it gives you your plot. I mean, like once something bad happens, all these wheels go in motion, and you've got the suspense built in, and then you have this framework by which it's sort of like you're hanging all these raiments of character and the past and secrets, and you get to sort of explore all this other stuff because this train is going forward. And so I guess because that's what I always wrap my real story around, I guess that's how I think of it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know you're a bit of an expert on sort of like noir and hard-boiled anyway. That's kind of your, so I was wondering whether you have like particular allegiances.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of, I feel very protective of what they call genre. Everything is genre, but crime will call genre fiction, and I do feel protective of that, just because, you know, we're so often diminished. Thriller writer, you know, it's sort of considered airplane reading, which to me, first, who doesn't need airplane reading?
Exactly.
But second of all, I think they're just story driven, and I don't know. I feel like why crime is so great to write about characters is everybody's back against the wall. You really see who people are. So you're stripping everything bare.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is television, because you have recently adapted your own novel, Dare Me, into a cracking TV series. I really enjoyed that, by the way. And you also wrote for The Deuce, which was also a wonderful series. Is there more TV on the horizon for you?
It looks like it. I'm adapting the Turnout for a limited series.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so that's exciting. It was weird because I was at one of the cases where I just finished the book, and I had to already think about it as a TV series, as it was usually there had been a lapse, like Dare Me, like years later, you know. So you have some distance from the book, and you can sort of see the shape of it more. But in this case, I really had to go right in and sort of tear it apart.
Right. I imagine that'd be very difficult to sort of restructure for television when you've just finished structuring a novel.
Exactly. I mean, it's a little easier now that there's sort of, I guess, the rise of the limited series. When I was a kid, they used to call them miniseries, but it was harder when you had this sort of imagine an ongoing series. So, you know, since we're writing about if it's not a mystery where you have a recurring investigator of some kind, it's very, lots of people are dead and some are in prison by the ends of our books.
There's really no act two of the story. It's done now.
It's sort of the Hamlet role. No live bodies left on stage. But yeah, I have enjoyed that the collaborative element is really fun. You know, it's a lot more notes, but it's sort of having to articulate what you're trying to do is something, you know, in novels, your novel speaks for yourself. Your editor reads your novel, they see but you know, in TV, you're always having to keep selling. You sell it, and then you have to keep selling it up the chain, and you know, so you're having to talk about it and get sort of, you know, the sandwich board out and sort of explain why your project is, and that part will never be natural to me. I always a little out of my league there, but I do love the collaborative and being with visual people who can see how to, I mean, they can do in one shot what it took me 5 pages to sketch out, you know, trying to give the way the world looks and the tone and the way that, you know, and they just can do it all. So that's.
So do you find yourself thinking in a different way when you're writing for the screen?
I mean, I'm very careful that it hasn't, I don't believe, affected the way I write the novel, but it is a very different set of, it's different. It's different because scripts are so tight and structure is everything. So really trying to it's like creating like dominoes, you know, to sort of fall in a certain way and keep moving parts around. And novels aren't really like that. And they're more intuitive, I guess, or maybe they're just more intuitive to us. And it's much harder to sort of set out these sort of building blocks, you know, because I'm not an outliner either by nature. So.
Right. Oh, that is interesting. And I assume that when you're working on television as you are at the moment, you're not also thinking about a novel, or are you doing both at the same time?
Sometimes hovering in my head, but I mean, I should be, but my brain doesn't go that enough of places, and it is a different part of the brain, I guess. Yeah, it is. You know, we live in the novels when we write them, but I would never feel that way about the script, I guess.
But you have an idea then, is what I'm asking for the next thing. Yeah.
Or it's sort of, I don't know, do you have that sort of mental drawer of maybe something around this sometime? Yeah. So just keep hoping one of those will magically come to life when I return to it.
Congratulations, Megan. It is a wonderful book. It is The Turnout, available from Left Back Books.
The Durant School of Dance, established in 1986 by their mother, a former soloist with the Alberta Ballet, took up 2 floors of a squat, rusty brick office building downtown, and had become theirs after their parents died on a black ice night more than a dozen years ago, their car caroming across the highway median. When an enterprising local reporter learned it had been their 20th wedding anniversary, he wrote a story about them, noting their hands were interlocked even in death. Had one of them reached out to the other in those final moments, the reporter wondered? Or had they been holding hands all along? All these years later, the story of their parents' end, passed down like lore, still seemed unbearably romantic to their students. Less so to Marie, who, after sobbing violently next to her sister Dara through the funeral, insisted, "I never saw them hold hands, not once."